Zach. Yeah, so like Meg mentioned, I'm Shane, alumni of the entrepreneurship program, and also I did industrial design here at Western. Same with all of us, Kyle, Taylor, and Zach and I all went through the program here at Western. And Kyle, Taylor, and Zach all just graduated in the spring, and I actually graduated last year, so about a year and a half ago. But yeah, we just wanted to share some tips and tools and some research methods that we've been kind of developing throughout our academia career and our professional careers as well. And then just kind of a general overview of kind of what we're going to go through today. This is definitely an introduction to some of the tools that we've kind of gained through our own projects, and then also, like I said earlier, kind of our industry experience and some internships and places we've worked in the past. So, and then like a big precursor for this as well too is avoiding assumptions, and that's something that we're going to definitely dive into more throughout their methods and stuff. But it's something we wanted to talk about in the beginning, that this is a huge place where we can assume and kind of lead down the wrong road when it comes to developing products for people, especially people that are experiencing different scenarios and experiences than our own, which is pretty similar to my final project in entrepreneurship, where I was kind of tasked of designing for people who are visually impaired to interface with technology. And obviously, it's in this scenario, it's pretty blatant to see that as an able-bodied person, it's pretty easy for me to identify that I need to go out and actually are visually impaired. But kind of in this next example we're going to go through, it's pretty easy to go down the wrong road and not really take these steps to actually acknowledge and understand your users and really the difficulties they're experiencing. So if we want to run that video.
Yeah, so this is a quick video that's often shown in sort of like design research contexts, and it goes to show how easy it is to dive into a project or a venture without necessarily even talking to the people you're trying to help. So let me know if the audio for this is problematic for anyone, but I'm going to go ahead and play it.
Hello. My name is Thomas, and this is Navid. We are inventors in the Lemelson MIT Student Prize Competition.
Access to communication is a basic fundamental human right, and every single person deserves to be a part of the global community. However, those who are deaf or mute communicate differently than everyone else. They primarily use sign language, while the rest of the world communicates verbally. This puts the deaf-mute community at a disadvantage, because like a foreigner in another country, they can't communicate like everybody else. What we decided to do is create gloves that translate sign language into text and speech. We have had extensive work with individuals in the disabled community, and have seen firsthand their daily struggles. We wanted to develop something that would help the deaf and mute better communicate with the rest of the world, without changing how they already interact with each other. By simply putting on a pair of gloves, those who utilize American Sign Language can now communicate with the rest of the world the same way they communicate with each other.
The gloves work by utilizing sensors on the hand and wrist to measure hand position and hand movement. The gloves then send this data to the computer via Bluetooth for processing. Once the computer recognizes and interprets the sign, it then outputs the corresponding word or phrase in text and speech. If you were to say, "Hello, I'm well, thank you," it would look something like this.
Hello, I'm well, thank you.
And just like that, we've translated American Sign Language into spoken English instantly.
There are approximately 70 million deaf-mute people in the world who use sign language, but over 7 billion humans on the planet. Our device revolutionizes the way these two communities understand and interact with each other.
Currently, there is no commercial sign language translator on the market. With this invention, over 70 million people achieve a new level of independence. 70 million people gain access to a new job, and 70 million people secure an improved quality of life, all with the help of a pair of gloves. We believe that access and inclusiveness are catalysts for change.
These gloves were crafted with this principle in mind and seek to promote a more unified global community.
Yeah, So that's kind of an interesting video done by two UW engineering students. And at first glance, you kind of might think, oh, it's kind of interesting technology. But when you really look at the community that it's actually trying to serve, as this kind of quote captures, right, that these gloves are designed for people who are of hearing. And it doesn't really even affect the core issue that the people that are experiencing this problem actually have, right? And even some of the things that, just if you kind of look at the research, right, is that a lot of communication that's done through American Sign Language has to do with raised eyebrows, orientation of the torso, and different kind of movements of the mouth. So they've totally bypassed this whole set of the language that actually doesn't really enable them to actually fully speak out whole kind of dialect. Meg, if you wanted to chime in, you had some personal experience with this project as well. But
oh, yes. I personally find this project incredibly infuriating, so I want to share that lens to start. As one of my siblings is mute. And this project sort of created a space as if there's like a superior and inferior project, or a way of speaking and being within culture. And you may have sort of heard that thread throughout, but in their narrative. But yeah, I was sharing with Shane and the team that within the deaf and mute community, many people were highly offended by this, because not only did it remove a lot of the nuance of communication and body language, but it also the product positioned deaf and mute people as lesser than people that were verbal speakers, right? So anyway, just interesting.
Yeah, and I think we just wanted to show this video, and I think the reason this video is shown so often in the context of user research is because it goes to show that it's really easy, even for very sort of high-level teams, to totally skip the first step in any sort of venture, any sort of project or service, which is to talk to your user, talk to your customer, talk to the people that you're trying to engage. And this is just a great example of a total lack of empathy in their research and development. And so this is the kind of thing that you can absolutely avoid if you have the right tool set and the right mentality going into that initial research.
Yeah. And too, even we have some of these quotes. I mean, even this one's from the director of the American Sign Language program at UW. And they said that they were surprised and felt somehow portrayed. They obviously didn't check the deaf community or even the ASL program here at UW. So yeah, it's a matter of not being able to actually go out and speak to somebody and just totally being oblivious and just basing your development on your own biases is kind of the gist of that one. And then, yeah, here, this is just a little graph to kind of demonstrate, right? Obviously, they have this initial value proposition. They wanted to kind of develop some kind of technology that made it easier for people of the deaf community to interface. And they just purely went on assumptions and then based all their research and development into this, actually pretty sophisticated glove based on the fact that, ASL is 100% on just hand gestures, where if they would have even just talked to a single person who experiences or uses ASL, right? They probably could have gained some insight in the very early stages versus getting to the end of this long project, which I'm pretty sure they actually won money for, which is amazing. But they totally were flawed in the very beginning, which made the whole project itself flawed in that fact. And yeah, so for the rest of this kind of workshop, we're going to run through this, right? And it's how can we avoid making these assumptions? And how can we pinpoint user and customer needs, their pain points, and their feelings? The first part of that is kind of jumping into user experience research, which is a field that hopefully some of you are familiar with, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into it.
Yeah, so yeah, before we start, jumping into some of the tools and resources that we really wanted to share with all of you today, we're going to just give a super brief framework of user experience research as a field. Because that's where a lot of these sort of tools and resources are coming from. And so we wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page. Maybe you dropped this in the chat, but how many people are familiar with the term UX, user experience design, or maybe with the minor that we have on campus? Anyone here part of the minor? I know I've seen a couple entrepreneurship students in the minor when I was taking it, and so I think there's a lot of overlap, obviously, and so we just wanted to start with a brief history of UX. Most of you are familiar with Apple as a leader in the industry in terms of, you know, streamlining user experience, making friendlier products, and really worrying about end to end how the customer is interacting with their services. And it's not a surprise that the term UX was coined at Apple in 1995 by this gentleman on the right, Don Norman. And they were realizing basically, you know, at the start of personal computers that there was a ton of usability issues that individuals were running into because these devices were being developed by experts for everyday use. And so they needed to create basically a field of expertise that sole purpose was to really prioritize the user and really ask all the right questions so that, you know, they could frame their product around their needs. And so, yeah, for those of you that don't know, that really the core ideas of user experience design are just putting people at the center of your research to try to empathize with sort of the behavior and the pain points that come up throughout interaction with either a product or a service. And the real goal of user experience designers in a company or in a venture is to communicate those needs to the rest of the team. So it's basically creating a bridge between the research, the data, and then the understanding that an organization needs to have to basically, you know, meet the needs of their customers. And we really wanted to show this graph, the spectrum of empathy, on the Nielsen-Norman group. Nielsen-Norman group, we'll show some resources later, but they're a great sort of hub for user research tools and thinking, and we'll get to that later. But they really emphasize that building empathy is a process, and it takes effort. It's not something that you do once, you know. It's not a linear experience. It's something that you really need to put effort into, and you need to bring your whole team into. And so we kind of want to show you some of the tools that can help facilitate this process. This might, you know, look familiar if you've seen the diversity and equity and inclusion graph. It's the same idea, right? To put ourselves into other people's shoes takes effort, and it's something that we need to do together, and we need to keep doing. It's a process. It's not a one-time deal. And so we really wanted to emphasize that UX research is a cyclical process. It's something you can come back to at any state or at any point in your project, and you should absolutely start by trying to understand your user, but it's not something that ever goes away. And hopefully these tools can keep you returning to this process as you're working on your own personal projects. So we wanted to basically go over some of the key resources and tools that we're going to be linking to at the end of this presentation. Obviously, the first step in user research is actually collecting data from the individuals that you're trying to engage with. So hopefully you guys have had some experience with running user interviews, but we also wanted to highlight sort of observational research as a super accessible and important tool. So, you know, going and actually just watching people interact with products or services, or sort of go through an experience that you're trying to actively design towards. And so observation can be super powerful. And then, you know, we know how hard it is as students to go out and sit down with a bunch of people. And while that's super key, we also want to highlight the power of surveys to just get a bunch of data to supplement your personal interviews and observations. After you've done that initial research, we wanted to talk about some synthesizing tools. and these are like internal methods that UX teams use to basically take all their interview data, take all their survey data, and start identifying actionable trends and insights that they can share out, either to the rest of the team or to leadership or investors that really need to understand basically the needs of the customer. So affinity mapping, empathy mapping, and journey mapping are all ways of organizing and understanding information so that we can kind of better communicate it. And of course, once you've reached that understanding, we also want to give you an introduction to some of the tools that kind of help you share that outside of your group. So whether you're pitching, again, to investors or to other individuals within your organization, communicating these user needs is another essential step in good user experience research and design. And so journey mapping can also be used to kind of point out those needs. Storyboards are another great resource to highlight sort of the intricacies of someone's experience in a certain situation. And then personas are also a great way of synthesizing a bunch of complex information into a profile that you can easily talk towards with the rest of your team and anyone else that's interested in what you have to say. And today we were really hoping to jump right into one of these tools, and we've chosen the empathy map that we called out earlier as sort of like a great starting point. And we were hoping to break out into small groups today and take a stab at actually using this resource. And so we've created a brief little activity that can get everyone, I hope everyone's familiar with sticky noting. Hope everyone's gotten a chance to use Google Jamboards, because that's what we're going to be doing today instead of whiteboarding. But the basic goal of this activity is to get everyone sort of practicing one of these methods and hopefully get to a point where you can use this for your own projects. And so we've created a prompt here. Usually in your own research, you'll have identified a target customer, or at least a scenario that you're trying to design towards. And since you don't have the time to do a bunch of research yourself, we've created this prompt. And we want to run a quick empathy map on the experience of teaching an online course for the first time during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's something as students that maybe you don't think about all the time, the challenges of teaching, but we want to basically use this as an exercise to put yourself in someone else's shoes and see if we can identify some pain points and insights that could help you potentially create a solution for someone in this scenario. And this might be a good time to kind of outline the general activity. I think we're going to send out a Jamboards link to everyone on the chat. Meg, I don't know if you have any suggestions otherwise, but.
That's perfect, yeah.
Okay. And so every group is going to have either one of us or one of the fellows sort of moderating conversation, but the goal here is, to just read the prompt. We've attached an article, which you can read if you have, if you want to learn a little bit more about the experience of teaching from home. But this is, we want to just kind of jump into this and see what you have to say initially. And so there's no wrong answers. We're going to spend 10-15 minutes just generating some insights as groups. So yeah, I'm going to stop sharing for a second here, and we can send out the Jamboard link. Let's see here.
I just put up the link, by the way, too. So.
And yeah, so if we can break out, I don't know who was in charge of breaking out again, but are there any questions before we dive into this? We'll keep addressing questions in groups, but fellows, if you have any questions, or if anyone else has any questions about the activity, now's the time.
I have a question. There are like the list of like 5 different things: the pain points, goals, assumptions, next questions, and opportunities. Are those different areas to ideate around, to like put on stickies to put in the empathy map? Or...
Yeah, that's a great question. So as we're doing this, I mean, you can take the map very literally, and we do want you to just think about pain points and goals and assumptions as you're going through this, but that's more to just organize our thoughts towards the end of the activity. So once we want to just like put a bunch of sticky notes up there, and then maybe start grouping insights once we've gotten some content up there. And so that's probably how we're going to wrap up the activities, because those are the actionable things. You know, if we were in the context of a project, you know, the goal of this activity is to get your team asking the next question. You know, this is meant to identify opportunities basically for a team to pursue. It's like, okay, so for example, you know, in the we'll see in the Jamboards, but you know, in the process of buying the TV, that's the example that we've posted. There are a lot of anxieties and thoughts and barriers that come up in that process, and so being able to identify those as a group is kind of the goal of this activity, so that we can, the next step would be to begin to ideate, you know, how can I address those needs and those pain points with some kind of value proposition. But yeah, let's break out if we're all on the same page.
Alrighty, so I am about to launch the breakout rooms in a moment. We have 15 minutes, and please Teams me if for some reason you get kicked out of the breakout room, because no one will be in the main room, so I can put you back in. All right, I will launch this right away.
Awesome.
Hey, Sarah, have you not been invited to a room?
the message.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonder, can I put you in a breakout room? I cannot put you in a breakout room, so I'm going to ask Olivia to come out because she's the host. What we're talking about, let me send you a link real quick. We're doing a empathy map.
Okay.
And so I'm sending the Jamboard link to you so you can see what's happening in there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So we're in different breakout rooms working through that process. And you're in E2 now, right?
E3. Oh, wait. I mean, yeah, E2. Yes. Sorry.
I get it all. I get all the things.
I get confused about it too because I took quarters off, so I was a little bit confused as well. No worries.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, they're doing a great workshop, so I was in the breakout room with Olivia, so I'm gonna tell Olivia that I can't come back, and we'll see you in a second.
Thanks.
Hello. Let me assign you really fast. We only have, I'm just gonna put you in my room because yeah.
Okay.
Girl, you're killing me.
Yeah, sorry about all this. It's probably makes it more difficult.
Oh, don't you have a class or something?
Yeah, there's a class that goes until technically 5, but he lets me out at 4:30 so I can come in here.
Oh, that's nice. Here, I'll join you over there. We can at least give you a rundown.
Okay, thanks.
Back. How'd that go for everyone? People go, feel free to share in the chat if you have any questions or insights, but very productive. We got a lot of sticky notes out there. Awesome. Yeah, Jamboard's a great tool for this kind of stuff. Super quick, which is important. So we want to generate as much content as we can in a short amount of time. So I was pleased to see that everyone seemed to get a lot out there.
Can I ask a side note question that's unrelated to this kind of?
Absolutely.
For our E3 assignment, do you think that I could get your guys' contact information and reach out to you guys later?
Absolutely. We'll get back into the presentation deck in a second, and you'll get a copy of that and all our contacts in there. And we absolutely love to stay in touch, and this is really just like the tip of the iceberg. So if you want to keep talking about this stuff, I think we're all excited.
Yeah, maybe we could check in with some of the fellows too. And is there any kind of big points that stood out to you in your groups of things that teachers may be experiencing during COVID?
An interesting pattern that we found was a lot of the feelings that we were talking about were like overwhelmed and anxious and unsure. And then sort of on accident, what we had in our thinks section, we had a lot of questions, and sort of that unsureness was reflected in how they were thinking.
Yeah, ours was a little similar. We discussed a few insights. but like one of them is it helps us put ourselves in their shoes, but also by noting all four, we're also being able to truly understand what they may be thinking. And also it's great that we don't necessarily know what they're thinking, but it helps us better understand what they're feeling, what they need to do, or what they're saying itself. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, and something that stood out to me similar to that was like, what might they already be doing to combat their problem? Because I think often we fall into the trap of like, oh my gosh, this exists and it sucks and they are not doing anything. But actually they probably are doing so much stuff. So considering that point of view is interesting.
That's a great question. Yeah, what are they already doing to address this issue? We are not the first people to come in here and try to understand that. And I think ultimately questions like that are absolutely the goal of this activity. Because now you can go and explore that further, and that's the great avenue to pursue now in your research is, all right, let's investigate specifically what tools are already being used in this context. And so I'm glad to hear that that's where we're landing.
Yeah, and the goal of this too is not necessarily to come out with like a super defined exact idea of what the problem is that they may be experiencing. And oftentimes you find that when you do something like an empathy map, that the next step is to then go back and do more research and then maybe do it again, right? And we like talked about this earlier, but this is not necessarily a linear process of steps. It's, you go go through and you may have to redo steps and come back to things, and you might get to a point where you think it's a problem, then you have another interview or you do an empathy map and you realize that it's definitely a little bit farther off than what your initial assumption was, and you have to kind of check those assumptions. And it's kind of the goal of this is to really step in those shoes and understand kind of what they are feeling and experiencing. So.
And, likewise, hopefully you come to the conclusion that you're not necessarily capable of fully understanding how someone else is experiencing a problem or a situation. And it's hopefully a reminder that this isn't something that you're going to guess. You're not going to get it right the first time, and hopefully it puts you in a mindset of being really, really curious and engaged with your user as you move on. Sweet. Well, I think I'm going to open up I'm going to share the presentation again, and we can kind of keep this discussion going, but I'm going to get us back in there. Let's see. You guys see that all right? Awesome. Yeah, so before we move on, were there any sort of patterns that we identified in groups as far as pain points or common goals that we kept seeing or that kept coming up? Feel free to throw that in the chat as well if you don't want to share out.
I think for our group, we definitely, a big one for us was in the field was I feel scared. Thinking about a professor who's maybe older and maybe they've never done this before or not familiar with technology or Zoom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of anxiety. I really liked the comment about the thinks quadrant reflecting the feels quadrant in terms of like a lot of questions. And I think that's something that, like, if we were a team, we'd bunch all those sticky notes together, and that's definitely like a bucket that we'd further explore. It's like, okay, yeah, what are the common anxieties? What are the common questions that are coming up for all our users? Meg, I don't know if you wanted to chime in on how your group went, but or how this relates to your experience having to do this very challenge on a weekly basis. But we'd love your feedback or insights.
Yeah, this was, y'all have done such a fantastic job facilitating this and opening up the conversation. We were talking offline, like I did a bunch of workshops this summer with other faculty members. We had over 1,000 individual classes that faculty members took to try to transition to online. And Serafima taught one of the labs with me, and we did a bunch of education this summer for professors who were seeking to find ways to be better instructors online. And there was so much anxiety, confusion, angst, sorrow, loneliness, like everything within the gamut among people. And so it was a really interesting and good experience to be a part of it. Hoping that other people would, begin to build and develop their confidence. So yes, there were a lot of feelings, and people definitely said things that were different from what they were doing. And I think often when somebody feels like vulnerable, we find that within customers that it's hard to get them to actually like really say what's on their heart, or maybe even to acknowledge it to themselves. So this was a super great example. So
awesome. Yeah, I think that's a super great point, that what all of us say and do are maybe different sometimes than what we think and feel, and it's important to keep that in mind. For example, when you're running interviews, because what someone says is a problem might not accurately reflect their behavior, and so hopefully this type of activity gets you thinking about kind of those nuances too, and that's why it's important to do all kinds of, for every interview, you should also be doing a survey, and you should also get maybe a chance to observe people, so that you can kind of get a broader understanding of how they're engaging something, or how they're experiencing a problem or an activity.
Yeah,
awesome.
And I think that too, there's definitely insight to be gained. Like I know when Meg and the team and I all spoke, she kind of brought this great point about how professors are scared about what they say on a recorded lecture, and like how that can be kind of, potentially used against them. And that's why a lot of them are kind of transitioning to more pre-recorded. I don't know if you want to speak more on that, but for me personally, I mean, I've been out of school for a couple years now, but it was something that didn't even cross my mind when I thought about, moving a course from in-person to online.
True story.
And yeah, I think hopefully you have more questions coming out of this almost than you did coming into it, and I think that's kind of the goal as new things come to light. Super. So I'm gonna keep. We have a couple more points before we wrap up, but I'm gonna pass it over to Shane. But we kind of wanted to show you maybe how some of these resources are going to tie into your projects and the tools that you're already getting exposed to through the course.
Yeah, kind of like Zach said, we want to make it relevant for you all, and we know that most of you are not UX designers, you're entrepreneurs, and we're trying to bring that back in context with the education you're already experiencing. And kind of like we were making the point earlier, obviously doing something like an empathy map or journey map or these other resources that we're going to link are kind of the first step in figuring out the pains and the gains and the job and or the goal, kind of the people and the customers that you're researching. Like we said, obviously this is not a linear process. You have to do this potentially multiple times, but it's kind of the first step. I'm really establishing and identifying, what are the pain points that your customer is experiencing, trying to really empathize with kind of where they're at. And then in the next step, it basically leads into your value proposition canvas, which I know is a great tool that you all are using, and is new to me because I don't think this was part of the major back when I was there. But you can kind of see this nice process of using something like an empathy map and journey map and other user research practices to better understand those pains and gains, and then directly apply those, and hopefully be able to kind of create a better product market fit. And those should be, directly related. I don't know, Meg, if you wanted to jump more into the entrepreneurship side of things, but I definitely think they work in tandem pretty well together too. And then, yep, this is should be familiar, I guess, for you all. I think it's from Strategizer. But like we said earlier, like going through an empathy map should hopefully help you figure out the pains and gains, right? And go through and be able to identify those kind of pain points, and then being able to visualize and kind of build the value from that, right? And like you saw with the ASL gloves is obviously they spent no time doing user research and they weren't incapable of empathizing with their users. So therefore, their value proposition canvas was totally flawed, and their assumptions that ASL was purely hand gestures. So we're trying to help you guys in the first stages to really avoid these assumptions, avoid biases, and kind of go through these research methods so that your product market fit is actually something that is valuable to your customers, rather than being something that is either totally unusable or is just not exactly kind of identifying and really solving the pain that they're actually experiencing. And like Zach mentioned earlier, this is not a linear process. This is definitely cyclical. It's, it's research, it's identifying, it's going through, it's synthesizing, it's really kind of curating that content. And then hopefully that's something that you go through multiple times. And then at the end stage, right, it's all about communicating that idea, even to it's a team internally, it's to investors, whoever it may be. You really have to show and kind of build empathy for them to understand why your users are actually experiencing this and why it's helpful. Yeah. And I guess that's kind of most of what we have here for you today. And Zach's going to kind of finish it up with some tools and methods that we want to leave with you. We're definitely not professionals by any means, but we have some professional tools and resources that we want to link so that you guys can do more research and if you're curious about this yourself.
Yeah. So before we go into our little cheat sheet, I just wanted to address like all of this work is obviously going to be changed by the fact that you're doing this remotely. So just like your instructors, we're all adapting to the challenge of doing our work remotely. And especially as a student, that's going to look different than, a professional who has 6 months to put together a user profile. You're on a time crunch, you have a bunch of stuff going on, and we really quickly wanted to talk about some of the stuff that's helped us as students do some impactful user research. And I think the first thing we want to mention is just avoid your friends and family. I know it's really easy to get on the phone with someone you're close to and have them take your survey, but we want to encourage you to take this opportunity to reach out to people that you might not be in your typical circles. That's the great thing about remote research is you can talk to someone across the globe, and we highly encourage you to take advantage of that. And we know it's scary, but I think one of the great places to start reaching out to people is on online communities. So I don't know if you guys use Reddit, even like friends of friends on Facebook, stuff like that. We'll share some links as to how to do that. But yeah, take this as an opportunity to step out of your comfort zone and talk to some people that you maybe wouldn't have ever gotten the chance to chat with. And then the other thing we really want to encourage is just record everything. So whether it's an interview or you're observing someone interacting with your product over a webcam, like there's a bunch of free services that allow you to capture video, speech to text, and these are all going to be super useful things, for yourself, going back and really being able to analyze an interview, or also, for presentations when you're pitching this content to people. There's nothing more powerful than like a video of a user saying, hey, I really don't, this isn't working for me. And so, yeah, we're going to share some tools that can help you do all that. We've kind of broken it up into groups here, but these are just entry points to each one of these resources. A lot of these link to the Nielsen-Norman group, which, if you remember the little intro to UX, Don Norman was one of the people that coined the term UX. And so he's part of this organization that really focuses on sharing user research resources. And so we have a lot of that over here on the left. And then just a couple more things that we've found helpful as students and as professionals, just some general tips in and case studies as we're transitioning to remote work, because that's been huge. And it's been great to be able to practice like pitching remotely in school, because that's super applicable now to like all the work that we're doing now. Like Kyle and I are working for a medical startup in Canada, which has been super exciting, and it's all remote. And so getting comfortable with pitching and just communicating remotely is a huge asset now. And so hopefully some of these tools will help you do that effectively. And then if you want to read more about the clubs or a little bit more into the experience of faculty having to pivot during COVID, there we've included those down below as well. And yeah, last but not least, we'd love to stay in touch. Please reach out to us. Email's great. And sort of continue this conversation, you know, in relation to your personal projects or your schoolwork. So yeah, absolutely feel free to reach out to any of us, and we'd love to stay in touch. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. This was so amazing. I need everyone to unmute and give a super loud round of applause. This was so amazing.
For the people who
so amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Our friend Tim West is on now too. I'm so excited. So we got a little bit of logistics happening that I'll overview to everybody. Shane, Kyle, and Zach, I think Taylor, you got to head out, but are you three still available to stick around for the 5s and 6s with coaching?
Yeah.
Good? Okay.
Yeah.
This was amazing. Then the 1s are going to go with Max and Olivia, and 2s and 4s are going to come with me and Tim, which I'm super stoked for. Tara, do you want to share the feedback super quick? You mind doing that?
Okay, just a sec. Pull up that slide deck.
This was so amazing, folks. Really. So amazing.